My name is Gabriella Kuz. I'm the CEO of the Global Digital Asset and Cryptocurrency Association. It's a pleasure to welcome you here today as part of our week 2 virtual roundtable, where we're going to debrief and discuss some of the exciting things that we've been learning about during our self-paced online learning program. Today's focus is going to be on Ethereum. I'm really excited to welcome 2 of my very good friends and colleagues, Rex Highgate and Bill Hughes. I'm going to just pass it over to them for 2 seconds to go ahead and give their elevator pitch on themselves and their background and how it relates to some of what we're going to be talking about today on the very exciting, very innovative and opportunistic, especially with regards to broader blockchain applications, the Ethereum platform. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Rex. If you want to just give us your snapshot. Rex Highgate, please.
So I'm the founder of DeFi Safety, which is a rating platform for DeFi protocols, primarily on Ethereum, but we're now very much multi-chain. And I started in Ethereum lurking in Reddit. I was lurking in Reddit when the DAO happened and trying to figure out what the hell was going on. At that point was the entertainment there. And I did my first hackathon at Denver 2018. So that's how far back I go.
Excellent. And I'm going to pass it over to Bill. Bill, if you want to just give like a really quick thumbnail on yourself.
I am a lawyer who works for Consensus Software. Our products include MetaMask and Infura. I joined the company about a year ago. Prior to that, I was at the Department of Justice. I worked in a leadership position at Main Justice. Prior to that, I was at the White House. Prior to that, I was in private practice as a litigator at Sullivan and Cromwell. My job, I just got into crypto quite by accident in 2017, just very much interested in the space and learned about it organically on my own. Didn't really even do much of it crypto related stuff at DOJ. But what I handle for the company is regulatory risk. We're a software provider, so we're a little different than a lot of the crypto companies you're familiar with respect to regulatory risk, but I also do a lot of regulatory engagement. That means talking with mostly legislators, their staffs, and other policymakers about how we should be treating these assets and these companies and these the technology generally from a regulatory perspective.
Well, thank you. I'm going to ask Isla, are there any new students today that you wanted to just kind of welcome to the group, or can we move on to the broader kind of structure of today's session?
I think the only person, Mr. Crypto Dad, did you introduce yourself last time? I think you missed the first part. You might not have.
Right, I didn't. Yeah, my Gmail has says Crypto Dad for 5 years, and I'm getting less of a negative pushback on it because I coach Little League football and baseball. So adoptions are taking place. I've been a podcast host and author, and I'm looking forward to being a consultant advisor in the space. So happy to be here and looking forward to the course. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. So the way that we've structured today's session, we're going to go through and do like a quick recap on some of the learning that we've had, and I think go into a bit of our fireside chat. Previous sessions, we've spent a lot of time, I think, going over the material. In this session, I'd like to, I think, dive a little bit more into some of the actual questions and have a little bit of give and take. Because I think we spend a lot of time at the, watching and absorbing, but some of the best benefits and the best way to learn are to kind of engage actively in conversation. So we're going to start with a bit of a fireside chat between myself and Rex and Bill, and then we'll kind of open it up and talk a little bit more with all of you, both in a breakout room session. So we'll do that for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and do like a broader group session together for about 10 to 15, okay? So just to kind of get started, I wanted to kind of open it up with a broad question. We've heard a lot about what some of the value and opportunities are around Ethereum. But, why don't we start with Rex? What do you believe some of the most valuable Ethereum applications are that you're seeing today? And how do these relate, especially when we look at, some of the layer 2 applications?
So for me, layer 1, layer 2, it doesn't really matter from an application point of view. You just have the efficiency of lower cost of transacting and greater speed. That's it. So for me, obviously, I'm biased towards DeFi. That's where I spend my time. And DeFi offers immense efficiencies, 24/7 operation and immense efficiencies. There's a lot of basic finance that it can do for less money and clearly and unequivocally. So that's where I see the biggest value for Ethereum. And as I said, I'm biased towards DeFi. That's where I'm spending my time.
That's okay that you're biased. I think if you're going to have a bias, that's a good one to have. Bill, I'm going to throw it over to you. What are you seeing as some of the, I think, most valuable applications? And, what do you think in terms of layer 1, layer 2?
It's a tricky question because there's so much that's so experimental right now still. I agree. Something like Uniswap is pretty cool. It works really well in all market conditions. A lot of the more salacious news coming out of the space about potentially irresponsible activity, none of that has anything to do with like what core DeFi is or does or how it functions. It's all working pretty well. And whether that, and so I have nothing else to add on layer 1, layer 2. I think as far as I understand it, if you want Ethereum to scale, you need to build, it will perhaps in the future be more of just a settlement layer where lots of other chains, maybe lots, or maybe just a handful of chains, use it to provide the security that they don't have to spend the money and the effort to produce for themselves. I think from what we see at Consensus, like NFTs are like the number of the NFTs have been a bigger on-ramp into blockchain ecosystems than basically anything else, because every retail facing company has a question of like, well, what can we use these for our business, whether just from a marketing perspective, a branding perspective, or even making our offerings more exciting or having better functionality. So a lot of companies that would otherwise have nothing to do with like digital assets are really exploring NFTs as a way to like enrich what their business is offering.
Yeah, and just to kind of like give some real world examples around that, we know that Maserati, for example, has used NFTs in order to almost have like a ticket into additional layers of benefits and engagement. So when we're talking about like what are some, use cases or how can this be applied in a real world setting, you're looking at the fact that this can actually be a mechanism or a conduit for enhanced customer engagement, okay? So for their side, they released a new model, Maserati. They, allowed almost as like ticketing, the use of NFTs. As people attended, like from geolocation, they were able to, transform that NFT into a collectible then. And we're seeing that not only with, branding and customer experience, but you're also seeing it applied for things like concerts. So Coachella released their NFT ticket. And we've also seen it in, professional education. So in an event like this, you could have a POAP or a proof of attendance component that could be purchased and could be used as a button or, placed on your own profile in order to designate that you've attended, you've been certified, and that you have a certain degree or level of expertise. So that's, a very interesting kind of point. And I'll also point to the fact that we've seen a lot of diversity and inclusion around the NFT space because of the fact that it's leveraging utility. And it offers like a very tangible, very understandable way to engage in the space. So thank you for that. I think we've already touched a little bit about this, but I think sometimes when we talk about digital assets, we often tend to focus very much on the financial sector. And so I wanted to kind of challenge you both a little bit. Rex, I'm going to throw it to you first, kind of, to talk a little bit about, some of the industries outside of the financial sector that you are seeing benefit. Or let's take it one step further and talk about what you think, going forward will be some of the benefits. What industries are going to get either disrupted or strengthened or evolved, to be quite honest. Rex?
I think in the short term, I think you'll see the Pope's proof of attendance badge and the degrees, the idea you'll have a digital degree that you'll be able to tag onto your LinkedIn and other stuff. And so I think that will be a big thing that will be starting. I know they're starting that in Singapore. I started doing some work on it, but then I was distracted by what I was doing before, but I think that's a short-term thing. And then I was in aerospace before I got into crypto. And when you buy an airplane, everything on the airplane is supposed to be certified, and trying to prove that such is an absolute paperwork nightmare, because every part has its own history of certification and such. So ideally, the airplane could be an NFT, and within the NFT are all the NFTs for the big parts like engines, wings, and such, and all the little parts and all of the maintenance stuff that are in there. So that for me was always one of the, I think now we have the blockchain maturity to really start to implement that. And it'll probably come from an OEM like Airbus or Boeing. I know that they're doing work on it. I've sort of lost track of the progress, but that was a use case that always hyper fascinated me.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think especially when we're talking about opportunities for things, and I'll just kind of expand that out a bit, but supply chain integrity, tracing and tracking, that component that you're bringing up is going to become increasingly important because it's a significant amount of administration and oversight. And so this offers a very easy to understand, access, transparent, accountable way of ensuring sort of origination and then, care throughout a process or an application. So thank you. All right, Bill, I'm going to throw it over to you now. What do you think? If you had to look at your crystal ball, what do you see, either today that's very exciting or, that you see coming down the line in terms of, what is it that we're going to see changed, evolved, or shaped?
I think that the first thing you will see is internet commerce start to shift over, meaning that now you sign into a website, you prove your identity by signing in with Google or signing in with Facebook or creating your own password. I think you'll start to see more and more websites allowing you to sign in with your wallet to prove who you are. More and more will, I think in the coming years, will allow you to engage in commercial transactions with crypto or stable coins. And so you'll see more commerce done on the internet with this stuff. Yeah. How the technology will sort of expand into other use cases, businesses, so in the private sector, businesses will have to be convinced that there are efficiencies to be gained and that the risks of not only the transition, but of the final state are low enough and understandable enough that they'll make the transition. I think a big use case is a lot of what government does. But government is like, unless you have like really strong, brave leadership, changing the way government works is generally harder. So for example, and it's harder for a number of reasons, not just risk avoidance. For example, in like land records, there's no reason why land records, you need an office of land records management or something like that. Everything, all of that data could be on chain, and it would be much more reliable, much more efficient. The reason why it's going to be difficult is because the status quo is a big lobby, and in Texas, for example, they passed legislation, and a lot of the stuff having to do with real estate was explicitly cut out because everybody down there who's does anything with respect to like the huge bureaucracy around real estate knows that this stuff is an industry killer. So whereas we could be gaining a lot of efficiencies with record management in government, I think that may be a longer road.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like we'll talk a little bit about some of the adoption challenges in a minute, but I think it's important to look at, clearly and with sort of a, a non-Pollyannish view of what some of the challenges are in terms of advancing adoption and implementation of blockchain. And in particular, if we're looking at, Ethereum. One of the things that, has come up, I think that something just to kind of keep in mind is that a lot of the issues, as someone who's worked on, anti-corruption and transparency and accountability initiatives, is that remember there's no silver bullet, and I think technology and technological solutions that advance, greater insight and oversight over use of funds, especially if you're looking at it from a governmental perspective, can help and facilitate that. But you also have to address some of the very human aspects that engage around this, which is that somebody somewhere benefits from there being inefficiencies. And those inefficiencies are often, at the heart of rent-seeking behavior, bribery, and these types of, opportunities or negative incentives oftentimes crowd out opportunities to like apply, adopt, and implement solutions that could be blockchain based, that could improve some of this and reduce those types of behaviors. So I think you're right to kind of point out, both some of the perhaps reluctance, but then I'll go one step further and say that it's not only just a matter of reluctance, there's also negative incentives that are cementing a position either in the public sector, but you can also be in the private sector, in terms of moving towards greater efficiencies and effectiveness. I wanted to talk a little bit about, a key point that has been on, top of mind for a lot of people, especially those that are building on the Ethereum network. And that's with regards to the shift away from proof of work to proof of stake. Over the course of the past, 2 weeks, we've become acquainted with some of these concepts. I wanted to just kind of, throw the idea out there and to chat with both of you to get some of your thinking on the degree to which this represents an opportunity, especially with institutional, those public companies that have to report and align with ESG and sustainability reporting. To what degree do you think that this will help the transition and perhaps openness to engaging in blockchain generally? Especially given the opportunities and the value of Ethereum with regards to having a broad base upon which a proof of stake model can be run securely. And I'll kind of throw it over, maybe Bill, I don't mean to put you in the hot seat initially, but we'll throw it to you first and then maybe over to Rex.
We're very excited about the merge. I think it's exciting because, at least from the energy conversation, it with respect to Ethereum should end that conversation, because as it's been described to me, I haven't done these calculations myself, but if you consider the current energy usage of the Ethereum network on a yearly basis to be the Burj Khalifa, it reduces it down after the merge to the size of a pencil. So if you're like me and you talk to policymakers, and lots of them of certain persuasions are very concerned about sustainability broadly, but it is the biggest problem they have with, based on their understanding of cryptocurrency. It's their biggest problem with the space. To explain that to them doesn't mean that they immediately flip and say, okay, it's great. It does undermine that as being their first talking point. I've seen how the merge is a touchy subject in crypto, especially among sort of like Bitcoiners, because it stands in such stark relief to like how Bitcoin is going to be forever and ever and ever. And that industry groups that need to represent the interests of like the Blockchain Association, they're in DC, or GDA, you have lots of members with lots of different priorities, and when some are Bitcoin miners and some are Bitcoin focused companies that are trying to wrestle with this question of sustainability, it's kind of awkward for the folks who focus primarily on Ethereum to be like, if everything goes well, like we've moved beyond it, and not having us not as a result of the merge are we throwing sort of Bitcoin under a bus. I think the questions that the merge and the resulting proof of stake ecosystem are going to bring to the forefront are questions that are germane to anybody who wants to participate in the validation of the network. Things like, how do you tax staking rewards? And this is an issue I've written an op-ed about that was in CoinDesk. A buddy of mine, his name's Abraham Sutherland. He is representing the Jarretts in a federal case against the IRS regarding back taxes the IRS said they owed for not paying taxes on their staking rewards. This was in Tezos, but staking rewards as they were receiving them, which is sort of like real time, they needed to pay taxes when they got it. He's fighting that court case now in Tennessee. The Proof of Stake Association is making these arguments as to that staking rewards should be treated as created property and taxed only upon sale. So there's going to be lots of legal issues that lots of people staking, both in this country and internationally, that's going to raise. And so I think that's good. I think lots of people engaging in the activity is going to have a bigger, more positive political impact than like a bunch than mining interests that are sort of consolidated in order to achieve economies of scale. I think it's going to be, politicians are going to be more inclined to listen to the concerns and try to accommodate the concerns of like mom and pop everyday people staking. And then the question will become, oh, well, what will the staking landscape look like? Will it start to get consolidated? Or will staking interests be notably diversified and scattered out through society? So, but I think of all of this through the questions of like law and regulatory implications. And so those are the things that I think about when I think of the merge.
Well, I think that's, one really important way to be looking at it, especially when we're talking about adoption and implementation, because legal and regulatory clarity is one of the key, I think, roadblocks when we see, broader acceptance, especially from institutions. I'll just make mention, one of the key pieces when we talk about, this space, is that idea of mainstreaming, bringing in institutions. So we've talked about it a little bit from the legal and regulatory side. Rex, talk to us a little bit from the technical side. Talk to us a bit about the technology, the ecosystem.
So for me, the big thing with the merge is inclusiveness. Anybody can join the network. Anybody can get some money from the transactions, because if you join the network as a validator, you get a cut in all the transactions. It's like being able to get in on get a cut on the credit card fees that are being paid. It's huge. And the big thing, like when I started mining in 2017, I did it on my ordinary PC. And at a certain point, the DAG got too big and my 2 gig graphics card wasn't good enough. And I had to go and buy a 40, so I stopped mining, that's a different story. But the point was, over time, the technical requirements have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, until really, if you want to do mining now, you need to have a serious setup, and you need to, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of business, the hardware is non-trivial.
Yeah.
That goes away. You can do it with 32 ETH, might be expensive in the future, but it's not that expensive right now. And a PC. That's all you need. Maybe an uninterruptible power supply, but that should be all you need. That should not change. That should always be true. So if you can get that 32 ETH, you can do it yourself. You can join something like Lido, and there may be some centralization in there. But you don't
and
have.
Can you define out Lido for people just so that they understand?
So Lido is a staking company where you can come in with any amount lower than 32, and you can join a group, and then they do the staking for you. So you just put your ETH in, 1 ETH, half an ETH, however, whatever value you want, and you get staked ETH back. And then you're able to, you're able to join staking and get the rewards, less their cut, without having to have the 32 ETH, which is the requirement. It used to be expensive. Now it's a great deal.
Yeah.
In that regard, another regulatory question, which is an important question, is how do we think about like staking as an activity? How do we think about the rewards that the protocol issues? How do we think about the transaction fees that are charged and distributed? And you can stake yourself, you can license, and that's by just using off-the-shelf software. You can use a service or a product like what Consensus offers. We offer a staking product where you license our software, and you have your own keys, and you use the software without us getting involved, and it facilitates your staking for you, and it's more secure because if your hardware and whatnot is not up to snuff, you may suffer penalties for staking poorly. And then there's services like Lido and others that sort of do staking as a service, where you can just give your tokens to Coinbase and say stake these. And the different ways you can stake may result in different regulatory treatment. If you're using a third party to stake for you, and that third party is pooling lots of people's money together to stake, a securities regulator looks at that and goes, they're offering a security. Like essentially the agreement that you've reached with them is an investment contract. And
Yeah.
so how that's going to play out, or it's a note, right? It's some sort of debt instrument where it needs to be regulated under a securities regime. So exactly how this is all going to play out is going to be interesting, and it's certainly not foregone conclusion. My attitude, and I think our approach as a company, is that if you are just developing software that allows people to do these things on their own, and you license that software as software, and you are not providing something that's much more akin to an intermediary service that's financial in nature, you are much less likely to fall under any sort of current regulatory regime. And so I think that's how we're positioning ourselves in this space, which is good for a lawyer, because if we can avoid all that regulatory crap, that's a lot of money saved, a lot of heartache avoided, a lot of headache avoided. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest difference with regulatory for blockchain is in so many elements where you're doing an activity, commercial activity, you have to follow a regime. It's a barrier of entry. There are gatekeepers. They're functionally able to stop you from doing things until you meet whatever the criteria is. And if you're doing something new, that may mean that you'll have to talk. So that all of these gatekeeper areas, blockchain isn't like that. Blockchain, they didn't ask for permission, they just did it. And this is the way blockchain has been developing all the way through. And then regulators are running to keep up, saying, this is how we would like to regulate this. Is this, it's a totally different area where the activities will keep going. And this is a contentious, but this is sort of my attitude. The activities will keep going, and the regulators are just running to keep up. And it will be an immense challenge for them, because the speed of innovation is so fast. Like by the time they have a very strong regulatory basis for fiat stablecoins, DAI and Angle, and crypto-based asset stablecoins will basically be the thing, and nobody will want fiat stablecoins anymore. They'll sort of be their yesterday's news, not as flexible. And so this is what I mean. The speed of innovation will probably be a challenge for regulation to even keep up with.
And that's honestly what we're already kind of seeing today, right? So we've talked about some of the speed of innovation, outpacing legal and regulatory, what I would say runway, so that there's clarity and that people understand how to engage. I think, you've rightly spoken to some of the technological issues, and I've loved having this dual lens, both a legal and regulatory and a technological. So, thank you both for your contributions. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to actually break out into smaller groups. And this is a chance for you to engage, one-on-one, and also to have a chance to debate and discuss one of our key questions of today's session, which is, will ETH remain the cornerstone of revenue generation crypto protocols? All right, so I just wanted to kind of call us all back. I wanted to just kind of highlight a few comments that were raised in our groups, because I think it may offer some insight for the broader session. But one of the things that kind of came up was the fact that we're kind of in the beginning of all of this, and Ethereum has a lot of power as well as opportunity, and the software providers, the applications, the next level solutions and products and services that will be built, that this is still in progress, and that this was an opportunity to both kind of share. And I really enjoyed some of your insights, drawing from your own experiences. We had in our group people who were in law enforcement, people who had, felt like their eyes were very much opened through this week's coursework in terms of the level of depth and development that has already been undertaken in this space, and really what the true benefits of building on Ethereum may be. I will say that for those of you who are considering building on Ethereum and are members of the Global DCA, let me know, because we do have an MOU that's forthcoming with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and we'll be working with them to advance that and ensure that people who are building on Ethereum have the support and assistance they need to be successful. I wanted to kind of open it up and just kind of chat a little bit. What were some, key questions? We have a small group today, so I'm not going to call on people, but feel free to unmute yourself and to share a little bit about, what were some of your takeaways from your breakout session, or even from some of the broader learning or questions you might have for some of our speakers today.
Well,
Hey, Gabby, can I ask a question?
Sure, go for it.
They talk significantly about the reduction in energy usage, but do they really have any computation on the speed of the network? Because, people talk about how slow Ethereum is right now versus, say, Visa and MasterCard. Obviously, the reduction in energy is critical, but also speed of network. Do we know what that will be once the merge occurs?
Functionally, it won't be much faster. It is not supposed to. Speed comes from layer 2, Arbitrum, Optimism, ZK Snarks. So these layer 2s offer the speed because you do 100 transactions, bundle them in, and 1 transaction on Ethereum. That's where the speed comes from, and that's pretty mature. So that's where the speed will come from. The merge is not supposed to make it faster, and won't a little bit, but not basically, no.
Thank you.
Excellent.
so I was going to say I had spent a week at Disney World, and when you mentioned NFTs earlier, I was thinking about the rides we went on, and like if you had a certificate of like completion, like I survived Tower of Terror, stuff like that would be like really cool as a retail client to have like an NFT like that, and maybe that'll come someday. So I was thinking of that in my head the whole time.
No, that's a good one. And, I think you rightly point out like a lot of what we're seeing, and I can talk in terms of broader trends, okay, both with amongst and between our current members, but also, on a daily basis, I'm talking to emerging candidate member firms. And over the course of the past, I would say 2.5 months, we've seen significant upticks from, traditional corporate players, largely around the leveraging of NFTs. And one of the key industry verticals that we've seen that in, not surprisingly, I think, is around real estate. The recognition that, Bill had rightly considered the fact that land titling, but think about mortgage payments, think about engaging, transferring ownership. How many of us have had to go through like 7 to 10 different stages in order to close a purchase of a home? What if a lot of that could be done securely, instantaneously, and in a way that was transparent and accurately recorded all of the key points of information that are needed in this process? And I think that's where you see, both in terms of physical property, real estate industry players getting engaged and reaching out on the subject, but also leveraging some of the traditional sales techniques, property ownership with regards to purchasing land in the metaverse. Everyone always laughs that McDonald's isn't really a fast food company, it's a real estate company. And I think you're looking strategically at a lot of core players that are understanding that it's a bit of a manifest destiny in regards to land grab and ownership of property in the metaverse. If this moves forward, this is an opportunity for them to secure virtual rights to this property and to be able to advance and develop. So I'll just kind of leave that last thought in your mind about verticals that may be influenced. Any other questions? I know there were a few in the chat, so I just wanted to open it up and make sure that some of these key concepts or topics have been addressed. Okay.
I'm
Hey,
kind of curious.
Gabby,
Oh,
go ahead.
Chantal, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. As you guys are thinking kind of big picture where this is going, I know we talked a little bit about the possibilities. Is the question of the need for decentralization coming into play, or are we just thinking like the future is blockchain, so let's get everything on there when we're talking about these concepts?
Sure. So I'm going to pass that one over to Bill and Rex, and then I'll give my 2 cents on that as well. Do you guys have any thoughts? When we talk about the shifts that we're seeing from centralization to decentralization, are we looking at broader movements, or if I understand correctly, Chantal, or is this more about leveraging blockchain and moving and transitioning preemptively in some cases?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my view on this is that you pick the right tool or mechanism for the application. So there are going to be some things where it is better to do things on using a blockchain, and therefore over time, at the very least, we would naturally migrate to the more efficient, more value-added usage. There's some things where we want it to be centralized, and it's better for any number of reasons. Maybe there's a reason why we want to trust a centralized intermediary for certain things. So again, we're sort of like in this period where we're trying to decide what works best on a blockchain and what doesn't. And I think the period where we explore that is going to be many, 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 many years. And there's no right or wrong answer. I think the people are going to vote with their feet, and that the less cost, both in terms of money and time and effort and complexity, that a blockchain poses, when you lower those costs, the more use cases it opens up for. If it's expensive, hard to use, slow, it's obviously good for a lot less. So as the tech evolves, maybe its use cases start to proliferate. And that's the thought, that's the expectation. Just like the internet, no one thought you'd stream video over the internet because it would melt down servers. Things got easier and cheaper. And so a lot of stuff that wasn't ever dreamt to be possible before became possible. And so is this going to evolve the same way? I'd bet yes. Is everything going to be on a blockchain because we don't need any intermediaries anymore? I find that unlikely. That's just my thought.
And before I pass it over to Rex, I just want to make one announcement because I'm cognizant of time. Please join us on Telegram. We have an amazing Telegram channel where you can pose questions, address some of the things that you may be unclear about. You can share resources with one another and reach out directly to Isla, myself, and our Global DCA certification team. We've put that in the chat, so please feel free to engage that way. I also just wanted to quickly mention that week 3's content will be available from the end of day today. If you have difficulty accessing this, please feel free, again, just to reach out to us. We're always here to help and happy to hop on a call to support you. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Rex for some concluding thoughts. If you need to hop off because you have another event, feel free, but Rex, go ahead.
I won't take a long time, but I can imagine a world where blockchain functions decentralized and as local as they need to be, functionally replaces a lot of government to the point that national boundaries become 20th century quaint.
Yeah, and I think that that's important. And what we're seeing, and I'll just close with like my 2 cents. I think, what we're looking at reminds me very much of a lot of the work that I've done globally when we talk about financial sector and economic transformations, right? So Bill, I think, pointed out something that I really agree with, which is that you're at the beginning of something very new and very dynamic. And it's not just a new asset class or a new technology, it's a transformation. And so that means that you're looking at something that's not going to take 2 to 3 years, but is likely going to take 20 to 30 years to really evolve fully. And what that means is that today, you're going to see, and people often laugh when they say NFTs, ha ha ha, a drunk monkey picture, who cares about that? I care about it because I'll tell you why. In the first instance, people go towards things that are low risk. And if they have issues or difficulties, few people get hurt. So when you look at NFTs, they're being used maybe first and foremost for entertainment purposes, but that technology that underlies it, as silly as it may seem, on the outside, the technology underpinning that is very, very serious. And I can demonstrate that by virtue of the fact that a lot of the corporates in this space are understanding of that and are looking to engage, learn more, and to build capacity internally to engage around this because they understand the trajectory that this will take, which is that today something is still very nascent, but over time it will evolve, and it has the evolutionary impact of perhaps disrupting or completely disintermediating key verticals in our economy. And so that's the piece that I would say when you're looking at some of the new or emerging applications for this, the first applications are often lighthearted or are not quite as, groundbreaking, but that's okay. That's what it's supposed to be, so that it evolves and grows and then gradually gets picked up, mainstreamed, and integrated. And at that point, when it begins to do that, it has developed enough from a sophistication standpoint to be able to be leveraged for those purposes. So I'll go ahead and I'll close out now. Thank you all very much for your attendance today. As a last just reminder, this event has been recorded and will be available for all of our attendees, including those who are available online today. Thank you very much. It's been great. Ethereum for all. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you. So long.